Truex comes in starting second, won the race, obviously at Phoenix, 9,600. Second best driver according to driver rating in the last 5 races here at Atlanta. Do we see the first 2-time winner of the season and also the first back-to-back of the year? Well, Joe, how'd your lineups make out after Phoenix?
It wasn't pretty.
Yeah.
But we talked a lot about diversifying. I diversified, pretty much pushed, but it wasn't a pretty day.
Yeah, I'm glad for what happened to me in Vegas because it helped. But it wasn't a terrible day. Minimized my loss. And I did a lot of diversifying too. The strategy that I tried to go with in some of the bigger competitions I was in was I thought we had a really nice core of the lower tier price guys. But I went with I tried to diversify the main guys because I just really couldn't pinpoint who was going to dominate. Was it going to be Harvick, Logano, Chase? I liked him a lot. Brad. So I was like, I didn't know where I wanted to shift most of my ownership. So I tried to diversify those guys, but guys like Cole Custer, things like that, it kind of hurt.
It was a little rough, and Martin Truex really performed pretty decently there towards the end, and it really allowed him to get some nice points and ultimately get that win. It was sad that I didn't have more exposure to him, but
I didn't have much either.
It's one of those things where you go back and going and reviewing what you did is really key. I think it really sheds some light on what truly transpired, and it really allows you to focus in on where you made mistakes and how you can improve next week.
And he had good numbers, but this was his first win at Phoenix. The best finish he had before was second, which is still really good. But there was just so many guys we liked with their price point and all that. We liked it just a little bit better.
Yeah, and Joey Logano, he got out front and led a lot of laps. He led 143 of them, which got him quite a few performance points, and that's what's really key in the DraftKings environment. So he was somebody that was really kind of crucial in some places to make sure that you were in the green at the end of the day.
So we have raced 5 races now, 5 winners, different winners.
That's a big impact on the playoffs.
Yeah, because some of these are obviously McDowell's a bit of a surprise. Bell, not really a surprise to us, just when and where he did it. That was a little bit of a surprise. The thing that I think is the most surprising, and all of them have run well, none of the final 4 have won a race from last year. Chase, he's looked good. I mean, he almost won the road course. Never really popped in Phoenix, but not terrible. Hamlin's has been actually one of the best drivers kind of consistently in every track, but he hasn't won. Brad and nor Joey.
Yeah, it's been kind of a surprise. We expected with what transpired last year, the impact of COVID, where we didn't have any of the qualifying and practice. It came about this year, and we thought the guys that took advantage of it last year would take advantage of it, and it's not been the case at all. Stewart-Haas hasn't looked the part. Kevin Harvick had a decent race, but it's not in any sort of Kevin Harvick fashion at Phoenix. It's very, very concerning kind of to see where they're at. Is it something that we're going to see them, I guess, steer the ship correct this week?
I mean, this is the track for him to do it, obviously.
The Harvick line.
Yeah. Oh, man, I just think Stewart-Haas as a whole, they're just a little bit behind this year. I'm sure at some point we won't be saying that, but it is a little concerning. Like you said, we've been 5 races in, and Harvick has shown some speed, obviously, but he just really, at the tracks that we really expected him to pop, he's really disappointed.
Yeah, for Kevin Harvick getting under 5x value last week at Phoenix with starting 18th, he got some PD upside, or the upside with his place differential, but no performance points. It's one of those things where when you go back and you dissect the race, which you look at after the fact, and we've got a nice little slate review that we created for you that's free now, that's available on our Patreon, but that allows you to really view the information cleanly and understand what really transpired. And whenever you're looking at Kevin Harvick, he had a total of 4.9 or 4.9 or 4.95, less than 5 performance points. And that doesn't get it done, especially with that price tag that he had. It's not at all what you're looking for out of the top priced guy.
Yeah, and he didn't get a high enough finish to counterbalance that. Had he gotten a third, not great, but you can kind of work with it.
But whenever Joey Logano goes out and leads as many laps as he did and stacks up those performance points, it's one of those things you kind of made a mistake as you see him continue to rack up those points throughout that entire race. He was dominant.
So obviously we won't know for a while who will be in the Final Four, but this is where the championship race is again. Personally, I wasn't a big fan of this race. It had some exciting restarts, but overall, I'm hoping the championship race is a little bit more exciting. But Harvick, if he makes it, didn't really impress. Logano, if he gets back in there,
watch out.
I mean, he was good last year too. I mean, Chase just was way better. I don't know. That car was obviously, it fell tech for a reason. They were as close to the edge as they could get. But Logano was amazing. And Truex, if he's able to get back into that Final Four, that Championship 4, now that he's got to win there, he's got to go in with a ton of confidence.
Yeah, and you were talking about some stats earlier throughout the season for Truex that he's consistently performed throughout the season. It's one of those situations where you're looking at it from the outside, and right now, early on, he's looking like, out of everybody that we've seen, really maybe the favorite.
I want to go into, before we get into all the drivers and get into Atlanta, I want to go into some of the season stats so we can kind of paint a little bit of pictures. I got some stats that we can look at, but I want to give a little bit more time to this Phoenix review. Is there, who really, for your lineups, really was the most disappointing?
Well, for my lineups, I had quite a bit of a exposure to Larson, and when he went to the back, I took a little bit away, but not much. Like we talked about in our podcast, he was somebody that's strong. He got a few performance points, but it just didn't meet enough to make it worth the value. He was 5.5.
Not bad, not what you want, but
when you got guys in the same kind of price tier, if you will, a couple $100 more. Martin Truex Jr., he got 8.75 in that value. Joey Logano, 9.18. That's a huge value. So,
well, Logano was the guy you had to have in your lineups essentially to really make any decent money. But where Larson was at, you could still have Logano. Obviously, it would have been better had you gone with Hamlin or whatnot. But I still think even with the lack of performance we wanted to see from Larson, you can still cash. For me personally, I think I had enough diversity on, like I said at the beginning, on the top guys. It was guys like Cole Custer, just a complete letdown. I mean, he had a total of 5.7 points.
Yeah, and it was unfortunate because doesn't tell the true story of how he ran that race.
Got in some trouble early.
Yep, and unfortunately had a bad finish. But you're right; those guys are ones that really impact your lineup. Like, take Tyler Reddick for instance.
Another guy.
He was 7 total points. He was starting 23rd, had that place differential upside, had a little bit of track history here, and ultimately finished 29th. And it's not a pretty day whenever you got guys like that sprinkled in with Kyle Larson, or even worse, Kyle Busch, somebody that we were really hoping this might be the race that he turned something around, and it didn't pan out.
You know, I'll tell you who actually was a little bit more disappointing, because, I mean, I didn't go heavy on Kyle Busch. I thought he would do a little better, but yeah, you know, we know the kind of slump he's in right now. You got to take the dice. The guy I actually forgot until you brought up his brother, Kurt Busch. We got really pretty high on him. He had some fantastic stats, great momentum going into the race, and just got kind of behind on the strategy, and really disappointing overall.
Yeah, he had great numbers going into it. He finished 15th. Wasn't horrible, but we needed him to do something in the top 10 to really achieve what we're...
Even a 9th or an 8th would have been would have been great and totally doable for him. I mean, he was getting closer to 6th and 7th place finishes. So for him to finish 15th, that was a big letdown. And 25 total points, I mean, that's terrible for someone 7,700.
Yeah, and the really, I think a lot of the difference makers, if you look at the guys that took home the money, they probably had Ricky Stenhouse sprinkled in somewhere, because at 5,500, he reached 5.5x value pretty easily when he got that 12th place finish.
Yeah. Sorry, I thought I had that optimal pulled up, but I do not. But so he was really good.
Yeah, the optimal ended up being Joey Logano, Martin Truex, Denny Hamlin, Bubba Wallace, Daniel Suarez, and Ricky Stenhouse. So that was a total of 353 points that averaged 6.7 value, and the price tag it came in at, the salary total was $49,700. So under salary, by $300, and you were getting 6.7, almost 7x with that lineup.
And what I see with that is it's really kind of, I mean, you can't really, I guess all these guys are named guys, so you can't really say stars and scrubs. But if you look at the salary, I mean, you're pretty high up top, and then you got some really cheap guys kind of down low.
Yeah, we talked about Stenhouse and Suarez in the previous podcast, and how if they perform like we think they could, it could be great for a GPP play. And we see how it played out. Those two guys ended up in the optimal.
Amarola was, I think, kind of worth the money. Didn't go super heavy on him, but he still got almost 6x, 53 points. Not the best play there, but you would have obviously cashed if you had used him, because he did have the best place differential, up 21 spots. So that team kind of getting hopefully a little bit back on track. Maybe that is a good sign for Stewart-Haas going forward. We'll see. This is a big track for them. So any last little thoughts about Phoenix before we kind of get into what we've seen so far this year?
Well, we talked about Stewart-Haas kind of being in a slump, and when we go back and we look through this slate breakdown, you look at the two top place differentials out of that race, Eric Almirola, Kevin Harvick.
Mm-hmm.
Surprising.
Right.
That's why we do these reviews.
But they're back there for a reason, too.
Exactly. But these guys are supposed to be at the front.
Yep.
Now that they get up closer to the front this week, does it change?
Yeah. And even Bubba Wallace, shout out Bubba and that team. I mean, new team. Obviously, anyone who's familiar with the sport, they know that. This is the first year. Michael Jordan's team improved 9 spots, get a 16th place finish. Not bad.
They needed that, and I'm excited to see if they can take that momentum into this week.
And for a track that he's struggled at, Bowman also up 8 spots, finishing 13th. You got to also kind of like that too, finally, because I think they've been possibly the biggest disappointment out of the Hendrick organization, even though Chase doesn't have a win yet.
I would say that's fairly accurate. Chase not getting a win early is not concerning. He's the champion. So we want to see something happen, but everybody's kind of getting their feet wet early in the season, and we'll see what happens. But it was a great sign of Alex Bowman taking the opportunity and getting a better, higher finish whenever he started further back in the pack, and it rewards him with a little bit better start this week.
Yeah. All right, so we've wait, hold on. I think this data is going to be skewed. This has a different. I think it has a non-points paying race in there. Might have the clash, but either way, this is still going to be fairly accurate information. Joey Logano, Denny Hamlin, they're basically right up there at the top for driver rating.
On the season?
For the season, yeah, for the season total. They've been, I mean, that's really no surprise to anyone, but I think Hamlin might surprise some people because he hasn't got that win, and he really hasn't got out front and just dominated a race like he did last year, several points during the year. So that one might be a little bit surprising. That one kind of surprised me. Larson at 101, not really surprising. I think he's been really good. I've said it in the last few podcasts how practically every race so far this year it looked like he was going to win at some point. So that's not really too surprising. Truex, Brad, they're all up there. But Chase, I mean, he's down there like 9th ranked. Not terrible, but he's below 100 driver rating, so a little concerning.
He's got some work to do. Hendrick as a whole, though, has performed pretty well, and I'm not really concerned is what I'm getting at. I know they'll get it dialed in, and he'll be a contender. With the way the season's played out, with so many different people getting wins, it'll come.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. You want to get into Atlanta a little bit?
Atlanta Motor Speedway. Hot Atlanta.
All right. So this is the first, obviously, I'll take that back. Daytona 500 is the first 500 mile, but as far as non-super speedway, this is the first time we're getting a true 500 mile. This is going to test the guys a little bit more than what they've been tested. This is going to be a pretty long race. 325 laps, mile and a half. And because there's more laps, there's more potential performance points. We got 227.5 for grabs.
So we've got a few more points because of the laps, number of laps that we increased from last week. Again, it's going to be key getting those guys that are out front leading laps. The place differential will play into it, but we're really looking for those fastest laps. This is a place where there's some guys further in the pack that can potentially get some of those.
And with the longer laps, it also means more stages or longer stages. So 105 the first two stages, and then 115 for that last stage. The reason why I kind of emphasize that is I'm sure there'll be a competition caution. I would imagine lap 25 or so, maybe 30. That helps these guys. But if someone misses the mark and they can't, if they get behind before the competition caution, it can be a long day. But if they can make it to the competition caution and get those right adjustments, they might be okay until they can get later in the stage. But if you miss at that first pit stop at that comp caution, and you go down a lap or two, this is a tough track to make it back.
Yeah, and there's a lot of this race doesn't get a lot of cautions. It's a lot of long green flag runs. Whenever you do have that, your strategy is going to be playing into the main factor into what's happening with the pit strategy and all that. Because whenever you get into the later stage, 115 laps in that third stage, you can't make it on fuel. So you'll have to do they'll typically split that last stage into thirds. So you'll have three different pit stops throughout that last stage. And if it's all under green, that's going to be really crazy to see what could possibly unfold at that point.
Well, especially like Larson last week. He got that speeding penalty for going, I think they said it was 0.05 miles an hour over or whatever it was. So tiny, but it was a penalty. That happens here, you're going down on possibly a couple laps.
Yeah, it's a fast track. They're going to get moving around. It's a very fun race to watch. They get 3 wide, 4 wide very often. It's going to be exciting. That's for sure.
So we've talked about him quite a bit. Kevin Harvick comes in at the top salary yet again.
Pretty interesting whenever you go back and people refer to the way that he drives around this track as the Harvick line. He's got his own style of racing here, and he's got some interesting stats here. He's number one whenever you look at it from the last 6 races as the average finish. He's just a guy that we talk about, it seems like every week, that just continues to perform and has great stats over recent track history. He has 2 wins here in the last 4 races, if you look at it that way. Him and Keselowski have been basically alternating here, it seems like.
So it would be Brad's turn if that trend continues.
If that trend continues, it would be Brad's turn to win. But it's where we're looking at Harvick starting a little bit higher up in the field. Hopefully they've dialed some stuff in. We saw that they had a little bit higher place differential, but he didn't have the laps led and the fastest laps that we want to see. It's going to be kind of risky with that high price tag. I don't know how much exposure this week I'm really going to be confident in having with Kevin Harvick.
Yeah, because all these high-priced guys are all kind of up front. So Kyle Busch is going to be the guy that offers the PD upside. So it's like, which of these guys is going to be up front? Who's going to... If Harvick gets out front, I would imagine he's going to set sail.
If you watched last week's race, you saw Joey Logano really dominate. That's what we're looking for every week. You have to have that guy. And then if he doesn't end up winning, you have to also pretty much have that winner.
Yeah.
So you really want to diversify in those top 3 spot top two or three picks of your lineup, you really want to focus that diversity there, and then really stagger it there at that bottom half too, and kind of do that mix and blend it really well to get a nice, blend of all these different drivers that we've got on the slate this week.
When I think when you look back at the previous optimal lineup, this, unlike the previous race where it was several high price guys, 10, I think there was 3 guys 10 plus, or one was just under 10, and then you had 2 5,000 guys. That's not the case. If you look at it last year, Harvick, obviously number one, he was 11.7, had to have him 108.3 points. But the cheapest guy was Cole Custer at 6.1, and then Austin Dillon, comes in at 6.4. So I think you're going to need a little bit more balance. You're not going to be trying to get that Harvick, that Brad, that Hamlin lineup and then hitting these lower guys. I don't think that strategy is going to play out. I think we're looking for 2 guys to really get out and dominate. I mean, look at that. Harvick and Truex were the 2 main guys, and then the next guy was Blaney, and he's only got basically 53 points. That's not a ton of points, and he started 7th, so he had some performance points, obviously, but I think you're going to have to build a little bit more balanced lineup. I think that's got to be the strategy this week.
Yeah, that's why we go back and look at previous race data and previous results from a DraftKings perspective, so we can really gauge from track to track different approaches and different strategies that have worked before. And you make a valid point where if we can really hone in on a couple drivers towards the top we're confident in, then it really allows us to diversify that middle section of our lineup build and really potentially knock it out of the park with a selection that might reach value fairly easily.
Mm-hmm. So I think after we kind of did our projections, I think I'm a touch higher on Harvick than you are. What kind of ownership projections are you kind of leaning towards with Harvick for your lineups?
He's somebody that, with that 11-1 price tag, starting 7th, he's somebody that I want to have a decent bit of exposure in. I don't know if he's going to be my cash game guy. I highly doubt that. He's going to be more along the lines of, hey, I'm going to take a couple shots and stabs at a PD, or a GPP play. So I would probably come in about 20-30% on him. I'm not going to be really too high on him.
Okay. I think I'm going to... I think the biggest thing for me if he goes to the back, I'll probably go lower ownership with him, just because I haven't seen that from him this year. Not that he can't get back up and be worth it, but I think I'm going to be pushing closer to 40-45% ownership. Trying to diversify with some of these other guys, but Harvick, this is the track for him to break out. He didn't win a race until we came here last year. Now, obviously, there was a long break, COVID, June, really weird timing. Maybe they had just that extra advantage because they've done so good here. Who knows? But I think if we're going to see a similar Harvick to what we saw last year, this is the track that he's got to break out. This is one he's got to. This is made for him, in my opinion.
Yeah, if we said it last week to a certain extent, we expected him and the guy we're going to talk about next to hopefully one of those two break out, and they didn't. So this week we're in a similar spot, and Kyle Busch starting 19th at 10.7. He's the next guy we're talking about. I continue to want to see Kyle Busch do something, except for get pissed off at his car.
Yeah.
But it's not happening all the time the way we're anticipating. He's starting 19th again, back in the pack. He offers place differential. He does have some decent numbers, but this isn't by far his best track. So I think it's one of those times that you can catch Kyle Busch at a lower ownership potentially, just because people are tired of rostering him. But at the same time, with him starting 19th, a lot of people are going to be all over him because he's got that PD upside.
Yeah, I think at this point, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that PD upside from him, because and it's there. Like, he doesn't have to finish that high and get that many performance points to be worth it. So that way, if he does get out front and dominate, you're going to be sitting pretty. I think he will be a little lower ownership, but I think I'll be fading Kyle Busch down to a much lower ownership than what I had last week. I think he's just going to be kind of sprinkled in here and there just because I won't completely fade him because of Kyle Busch. But, yeah, not one of my favorite guys this week. The other Kyle Larson, 10-4, starting 6th. Unless he gets sent to the back again, I really like him here. He's done really well here with poor equipment.
Last week, how many cars did he pass? Like 1 million?
All of them, like 4 times.
He got sent to the back, 3 times total?
Something like that, yeah.
Because it failed inspection, and I think he had two speeding penalties. That's a lot of cars that he had to pass, and he ultimately ended up where he's starting 6th, so he had a great finish last week again. It's somebody that you have to look at every week, and they're continuing to price him up, and he's deserving of it because he continues to perform. If he can get out and have the speed that he's continued to show, there's no reason that he couldn't be a dominator in this race.
So in his last 4 races in Chip Ganassi equipment, obviously we'll be referencing that quite a bit, he has averaged 37.3 laps led and 17.5 fastest laps.
Yeah, and the last 3 races here, I guess in 2017 he got a 2nd place finish, which means he was up there in that Ganassi equipment competing for a win. He led 7 laps during that race, and then he's got a top 10 in the last 2 races here too. So even if he doesn't come out and win the race, he's somebody that's going to be up front competing, especially with the speed that we've seen throughout the year with him. He's somebody I'm going to have a decent bit of exposure to. Not my favorite play, but he offers solid upside.
Yeah, I'm going to, like I said...
Consistency is really what it is ultimately. Not the upside, is more consistency in my opinion.
Yeah, he's just fast. He's making the most of the equipment. He's a little bit of a gamble because obviously he's got the speeding issues last week, but I think they'll get that ironed out. I mean, he's a great driver. Hopefully he's not one of these drivers who's looking ahead to the Bristol dirt race next week. Hopefully him and his team, they're all focused on this race. And if they are, I think you have to roster him. I mean, 10-4 is really not too bad for what we've seen this year. And I think even giving him around his average, he's going to clear 5X, I think, fairly easy. Obviously, just gets into the back. That makes it a little bit more iffy. We'll see how that plays out. But a guy you've already mentioned, coming in right below him, 10-2, Brad Keselowski. He starts 4th. Like I said, if we're keeping up with that alternating pattern, he's next in line after Harvick to get that win. So what are you thinking from Brad this week?
Well, going back and looking at the numbers, if he's not finishing 1st, it looks like he's finishing 9th. So it's interesting to kind of see that, but he's a top 10 either way you look at it. It's a model of consistency, very similar like we saw with Kyle, or talked about with Kyle Larson. The guy seems to find a way to continue to finish these races up front. That's why he's an elite driver with Team Penske. He's a guy that starting 4th, he's in an interesting spot, but if he is able to get those fastest laps and the laps led that we've seen him be able to stack up in previous races, I would imagine that he could easily achieve that value.
Yeah, he's got the out of the last 5 races, he has the 2nd best average finish behind Harvick. Harvick's at 4.2. He's at 4.4. That's pretty good.
Yeah, it's a very impressive, and it's something that whenever you're going through the data especially at a track like this, and you can see that consistency. It's still NASCAR. Things can happen, but that's what you're looking for in a guy that you want to spend some of your top-tiered money on.
And 10-2 isn't too bad. It's really interesting looking at this. I mean, last week we had 3 guys in the 11K. We only have 1, and he's right at 11,000. They really kind of blended the salaries this week. It's going to be interesting building lineups. A guy who's, we mentioned, been one of the best drivers so far consistently this year, but hasn't really had that breakout race, in my opinion, doesn't appear to be his best track. But Denny Hamlin, 10,000, starting on the pole. That's another thing. It seems like pole sitters haven't really had the best time so far this year. It's not an advantage because you're not actually qualifying for that spot for that week. It's all based on what you've done this season and the previous race.
Yeah, so when we go back and look through the data, the majority of what we are reviewing from people starting on the pole or any of this information that we're going through is based on people qualifying and starting based on their speed. This is a completely different scenario, and we've seen it week in and week out with the races so far that it hasn't at all benefited the guy on the pole. I think we're in a similar situation with Denny Hamlin. It could be a spot where I sit back and be like, that was dumb. But with what I've seen so far, I'm not very confident in going that route.
In the last 5, he's averaged basically a 15th place finish, but that includes 2 top 5s. So it's not a clear cut. No need to put him in there, because you also got to look at how he's done this year. And even Gibbs, we were kind of down on him going into last week, but after what Martin Truex has done and Hamlin has kind of continued to do, and obviously Bell has the win. I mean, really, Kyle Busch is the one who's making Joe Gibbs look bad, and that's crazy to think about and say. He's really been mostly kind of a disappointment.
Yeah, and with Christopher Bell on the team now and getting that win early and having consistent performances, it puts Denny Hamlin and guys like Kyle Busch and Truex where they want to win early too. So I'm expecting a little bit more from Denny Hamlin this week, but
here, I'm sorry to cut you off. I just noticed this. Here's one of the reasons why I am, and I think you're also hesitant on Hamlin. He is the 9th ranked driver according to driver rating, but he's basically the same, and he actually has a worse average finish to the guy right below him, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. So, yeah, I'm in it's a tough spot for Hamlin for me too.
Especially when you point it out like that.
Yeah, I mean, come on, we all know what's going on here.
Yeah, but again, I don't want to completely fade him because it's Denny Hamlin and he has the potential to go off.
Absolutely. Another guy that has the potential to go off, but is a little better here than Denny according to driver rating, but not much. Only the 8th ranked driver, Chase Elliott, 9,800, starting 5th. Kind of a hometown track for him. He's a Georgia guy, Dawsonville, Georgia. I'm having a little hard time with this one, and I mean, I know Chase is going to pop at some point, but man,
I think this is the race.
You think so?
I think it is because he's got 4 top 10s here. And one thing, whenever you look at Chase, you don't see him priced under 10,000 all that often. And with him offering 4-place differential upside, the potential to have some opportunities to get out, I'm not saying it's a shoe-in by any stretch of the map. I just think this could be where people just sleep on him enough where he could be a home run for you.
The thing that, obviously it's Chase Elliott. It's Hendrick Motorsports. They can always show up with cars that has the potential to dominate. But when I look at his stats the last 5, the thing that makes me hesitant on him is you're right. He has an average finish of 10th and 4 top 10s, 1 top 5. So he's run really good. Average running position 9.7, fantastic. Only averages 10 fastest laps and averages 5.2 laps led. You do need a little bit more out of that category for him to really be worth it when you got guys below him that have been really good this year and are pretty good at this track.
Agreed, and I think a lot of people are going to view it that way, and that's why I'm saying from a DK angle, DraftKings, that's why I want to try to target him this week.
Because so does that make it more of a tournament play for you, or does it make it more of like a cash play for you, in your opinion?
I'm going to have a little bit of both because I think it lends itself to a completely different approach on the cash game, but he, in my opinion, is more of a GPP target. Going down the list, there's guys that I think will be higher owned, and Martin Truex Jr. and Joey Logano and Ryan Blaney in that same kind of price tag, and they all offer their own little offering. So, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. He's more of a GPP target, but I'm not going to shy away from him in some cash scenarios as well.
Well, we haven't had a not back to back. Well, we haven't had that either, but we haven't had a multiple time winner yet this year. Truex comes in starting second, won the race, obviously at Phoenix, 9,600. Second best driver according to driver rating in the last 5 races here at Atlanta. Do we see the first 2-time winner of the season and also the first back-to-back of the year?
Yeah, it could happen. It really could. And Martin Truex is, like we talked about a little bit earlier, continued to have solid performances throughout the season, and he's a veteran. He's in a position now where he can race for wins. He doesn't have to race for points necessarily right now for the next few races because he's in the scenario right now locked in. But there's so much stuff, especially with so many different winners, that it could all play out differently later on in the season. But for now, he can focus on winning and starting second. He could really try to get out and lead a lot of laps early.
Yeah, I'm going to have to up my Truex ownership this week because 9,600, second best driver the last 5 races. Obviously doesn't have the wins, 3 top 5s though in that time. With this price tag, I mean, if he can get out front early, maybe he gets the jump on his teammate Hamlin, who, like I said, it's not his best track. If he can lead all the laps up to the competition caution and then sprinkle in some fastest laps throughout the race and finish 4th, 3rd, you're not going to hate it.
No, you'll reach 5x value with just doing that. And if he wins the race or gets a second place where he's starting and does dominate, man, that's a lot of points. And we've seen him be able to perform here better than Hamlin. That's why I think I'm going to be more confident in that play. He's going to be more of my cash game build.
And he really is a great 1.5 mile racer too. We have to throw that out there. I mean, it's not like this is just a particular track he's good at. No, he's good at 1.5 miles.
And if you look at the last 6 races here in Atlanta, him and Brad Keselowski have the same average finish. And Truex is coming from 4.5 spots further back to do that. Somebody that I'm looking at, especially starting up where he doesn't have to pass any cars. He's on the front row. He's literally next to Denny Hamlin, like you were mentioning. It's a prime opportunity for him to get out and just dominate.
Speaking of dominating, the guy who dominated but did not win the race, Joey Logano from last week. Joey Logano, 9,400, starts 3rd. He's the guy that if he can get around Hamlin, and that might be the biggest threat to Martin leading early laps. And just kind of judging off history, Logano tends to do really well early, and then he's kind of faded back some towards the end of the race. So if he gets out front and leads those first laps for competition caution, and we'll see some fastest laps, he's a guy that doesn't have to do too much to reach value either. Yeah,
he's in a great spot. Again, I really like what you just pointed out, where he seems to perform really early on in the race, or seems to have good early on success, and then kind of fades later on. Kind of looks like some of his Atlanta history is a prime example of that, because he's got great finishes, but it's just not the wins. It's not the top 2 or 3 positions that we're accustomed to seeing some of the other guys that we just got done talking about finish.
And so he doesn't have any top 5s at this track in the last 5 races. So even though his teammate Brad has done pretty good here, and even Blaney has had some nice success here, I made the optimal lineup last year, so, I mean, you're doing pretty good. This isn't the best. It's not terrible. Average finish of 11.4, 3 top 10s, but like I said, no top 5s.
Yeah, but he's been so consistent throughout this year. You've got to continue to take that into account. And I'm going to... I feel more comfortable and confident in Martin Truex throughout the race than I do Joey Logano for the entirety of the race, but I don't want to sleep on Joey Logano being able to get out and be as dominant as he's capable of being.
His teammate offers a little bit more upside. Ryan Blaney starts 10th, $9,200. I feel like I think Blaney's going to pop at some point this year. I don't know if I see it happening this race. Not the best history, but I think he's improving here. He's getting better. Penske as a whole has been good this year. Is this the race that we see Blaney really kind of take that step forward, or is he going to be a guy we need to kind of back off of?
He's going to be interesting, and I think he's in a spot where he's going to be pretty high owned because he's right there at 9,200, starting 10th. He offers more upside than anybody in that $9,000 to $11,000 tier outside of Kyle Busch. So people are going to take more shots at rostering Ryan Blaney because of that potential place differential, and being in Penske equipment, he has the equipment to get out and lead some laps. But it's going to be hard for me to want to play him because of the inconsistencies and just sheer sometimes Ryan Blaney shit luck. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah. I think I really thought he would do more with Todd Gordon. I mean, we saw the crew chief, Todd Gordon. We saw him win a championship with Joey Logano as his crew chief. And when they all made that switch, everyone was kind of last year there. Everyone was kind of scratching their heads, like, well, "What is Penske doing?" And two of his drivers, Brad and Joey, made the final championship 4. Blaney did better, not his best, but he did better. But I really thought this year we'd see a little bit more from him. But I've been a little disappointed, and to be honest, I don't love his spot here. So that might be a great opportunity for people to take advantage of my low ownership and let him set sail on me.
Yeah, no, I think he really will be one of the higher owned guys, and I just because of the inconsistencies, it's almost a red flag for me because of that. But it's something I don't like. It's very hard for me to want to fully fade guys with his potential and capabilities. I want to have a little bit of exposure, but I really don't want to go very heavy this week.
Well, a guy that has impressed the heck out of me so far this year, and man, it's really good to see the 24 doing well. William Byron starts 9th, $9,000. I'd love to get him with a little better PD upside or maybe a little cheaper price tag, because I think that people are still maybe kind of sleeping on Byron a little bit, but he's really impressed me. I really like him, and he does not have the best stats here, but I'm kind of throwing some of that out this week in my approach. I think he's one of my favorite plays.
And basically, you have to take that on how he's performed this year, because if you look at his stats here, his best finish is 17th in his 3 races as a Cup driver. But if people are going back and looking at just recent information based on performance at tracks and whatnot without taking in what he's done so far throughout this year and his consistencies, they're going to miss a key factor in some of the decision making that we are put into making our decisions in this. Because starting 9th, he offers some place differential, and he's just been more of a model of consistency compared to Ryan Blaney, who's starting right above him. And we've seen Team Hendrick with that speed consistently. I have I wouldn't say much better feeling, but I have a little bit more of a, warm and fuzzy with rostering him versus a Ryan Blaney.
I was thinking about this earlier. Going into the season for Hendrick Motorsports, they got 4 drivers. I think everyone thought, Chase is number 1. I think Larson would probably have been number 2 for most people, and if not Larson, then maybe Bowman. And so they'd probably be 3 and 4. And I think most people would probably kind of consider William Byron number 4. But I think the way you look at the way this season's gone, Larson's been the best, most consistent. Well, maybe not most consistent, but he's been up there. But it's been real close between him and Byron. And then guys like Alex Bowman, his teammate, in my opinion, he's like the worst one so far. Out of the Hendrick, he's been the biggest disappointment. Getting a little bit back on track last week, I don't know. I'm still hesitant to want to get all over Bowman.
Well, Bowman is starting right under him in the salary position at 8,800, starting 14th, he offers more upside from a place differential potential. But again, you're talking about something that is very, I guess, pertinent to what's happening is you see the consistency of his teammates, and then he's not performing up to that, and it kind of makes you a little leery of wanting to roster him. But at 8,800, that place differential upside, I'm going to have some more. I think I'm a little bit higher on him than you are because it just from a DK angle offers what we're looking for. Even though some of his information, or I mean his data isn't the greatest, it's still from my perspective gives us enough upside potential to really want to hone in on him a little bit more.
Well, I have no disagreements with when you look at it on paper, salary versus starting position, all that. He does have a higher upside than what William Byron does. But with what we've seen this year, it's really hard for me to want to go that way because of the next two guys on the list. I'll get to them in just a second, but I think Alex Bowman will probably be one of the lower-owned drivers. I don't think anyone's going to want to play him, so he does offer that sneaky upside there, and he's not a complete terrible play, but man, like you said, you're higher on him than I am. I understand the way the math kind of works out, but I don't see it with the performance this season, and to me, this is more than likely not the track that Bowman gets it back on track.
We'll have to wait and find out, but you did mention the next two drivers. The next driver specifically is going to be, I would imagine, the chalk of all chalk.
He's got to be in the 60% ownership at least.
And we're talking
and then in the large tournaments.
Yeah, and we're talking Austin Cindric at 8,600 starting 39th. This guy has great track history in Xfinity here. He's an Xfinity full-time driver, and he's only raced one time in the Cup Series this year, and that was at Daytona, and performed pretty damn well. So I know a lot of people are going to really focus on trying to build most of their lineups around him, and I don't blame them.
I wish that this wasn't happening. I wish he had a chance to really qualify because it's just one of those where it's just like you have to put him in. It's like just go ahead, put him in number one, and then build the rest of your lineups around it because he's got top 20 upside, and if he hits top 20...
Yeah, he's basically the free play on a bingo card.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you really want to start your lineups. But again, we talked about diversify. Do not play him in 100% of your lineups. Let me repeat. Do not play him in 100% of your lineups.
Because he's got a lot of cars to pass, and things can go wrong in a hurry. Just because he should finish top 20 doesn't mean that he will. And if he doesn't, and you have nice lineups that don't have him, you'll have a big advantage on most of the competition.
Because he will be the highest owned guy, and we know that without any hesitation. And it's one of those things where if you are looking to be different, I'm going to completely fade him in some of my GPP tournament plays because it will be different than, 30% of other lineups.
Yeah.
Or 60% of other lineups, I mean.
Yeah.
So it will be something that will stand out versus the rest of the field.
I think if Cindric wasn't in the field, the guy below him on salary, 8,400 starting 29th, Tyler Reddick, would probably be the highest owned guy because that's nice upside. He runs well on 1.5 miles. This is a fast track. It does offer some kind of fence driving, not as much as like Homestead, or so I don't think we're going to see like a second place finish out of him. But if he can get up top 15, that's a nice play. That's a nice pivot off Cindric. I don't know if the ceiling on them is going to be quite the same. I think Cindric, because of the 10 extra spots, that's hard to overcome. But if Reddick gets a top 10, which he's capable of, we've seen it this year, and if he's able to get some fastest laps, probably won't lead any. He could end up being a better play than Cindric.
He could, and I think a lot of people have been burned by Reddick already this year, and could be impactful on the way that they're building lineups, especially with Cindric right there in front of them, offering so much more upside. But looking at Reddick's numbers, it's not at this track. It's not the greatest, and he hasn't performed great the last couple of races this season. But again, just that upside, knowing that he's in equipment that can finish in the top 10. This track is fairly similar to Texas, where he finished, second behind Austin Dillon last year. So these are things to consider, and it's something I'm looking at Tyler Reddick, where I want some exposure for sure, because he offers so much. Even though he's burnt us a couple times and burnt a lot of people, he's still somebody that you can get a top 15 performance out of and really hit that 5x value.
Yeah, I'll have him. Might try to tame him back a little bit. I might try to diversify a little bit more. We'll see once we start really constructing lineups. I think we've got to kind of go back to the well a little bit based on this guy's numbers. Kurt Busch is pretty good here at Atlanta. Starts 11th. Some upside. He's almost in the same spot as last week. Similar salary, 8,300. Similar starting spot. Similar track performance. He's not going to have two bad races in a row, right? I mean, we're not going to let him burn us twice, right?
You hit the nail on the head. It's almost like we're going back to the well. You look at everything, it's almost a mirror image of the stats last week. It's really crazy to look at how good and consistent he's been here. His worst finish is 8th in the last 5 races. He hasn't 6 race data, but he missed the 2015 race due to an incident that he was suspended from NASCAR through. But he came back and won the pole in 2016 and finished 4th and led 62 laps there. So he has the potential, and he has the equipment to get out and not dominate a race. He doesn't need to, especially where he's starting at 11th, $8,300. It doesn't take a whole heck of a lot to pay that price tag off for Kurt Busch. He's the model of consistency. He's been consistent this year. Oh man, you put him, Tyler Reddick, and Austin Cindric, all 3 of those guys right there in that price tier. You're looking at some difficult decisions that have to be made.
Well, I don't think it's going to be that difficult for most people. I think they're going to plug Cindric, they're going to plug Reddick, and they'll probably plug the guy below Kurt Busch, Matty D, because he's starting 20th. But the reason why we're really highlighting Kurt Busch again, in those last 5 races you mentioned, average finish 5.6, includes 2 top 5s, all top 10s. He's not getting a ton of average fastest laps. He's only getting about 8.8, basically 9. But he is getting out front and leading. But like you said, you don't need him to do that. That's a pure upside if it happens. Maybe that's some pit strategy or whatnot. But if he's able to get in that top 10, finish around his average of 6th, and just pick up a couple fast laps, you're in the 5X pretty easy.
Yeah, that's why I don't want to skip over him. And he's a great guy to pair with Cindric and one of the other top tier guys as a core in a cash game scenario. That's what I might or most likely will do in most of my cash game builds. And I advise you to take a look at him a little bit harder than what some people will.
So Matthew Benedetto starts 20th. It's 8,100. Terrible track history here, but mostly in junk equipment compared to what he has now. They need, we mentioned it last week, they need some solid finishes. They need solid runs. They're just not quite getting it this year. You need him to do some stuff, and I don't know if he can get it done this week, just based on what we've seen this year so far. How are you feeling about Matty D this week?
I am not very confident in Matt this week. I don't know if there's something with the team. I don't know. It just hasn't felt like it's been a cohesive team environment or whatever the case may be. It just doesn't seem right that they're not firing on all cylinders. But starting 20th, he does have some place differential upside, and it won't take a lot with that $8,100 price tag to really reach a value point that's achievable. But it's just the confidence I have in what's gone on throughout this year, looking at previous track history and track type history, is just kind of an issue where I might wave a yellow flag at him.
Yeah, I don't think he's gonna make too many of my lineups. I think there's just nicer options. He really, to burn you, he's got to finish top 10, which is possible in that equipment. I just don't know if it happens this week. So I'll still be rooting for Matty D. I want to see him get that first win. I want to see him do good. I enjoy listening to their guys' podcast. He's seems like a great dude. So nothing obviously against him personally, but not a big fan this week.
Yeah, I love Matt. Like you said, I listen to his podcast too. Great guy. It works his ass off. He's somebody that puts in the work that's required. So I do anticipate them to get better throughout the season. I just don't see it happening this week.
Going from a guy I want to play to a guy that I'm never comfortable playing, Eric Almirola starts 16th, 8,000. Has been terrible this year, but finally got that good win or good run, like we mentioned earlier in the podcast. Starts 16th, not his best track. He actually averages a 16th place finish in his last 5 here, but he does have a top 10, and he does have 3 top 15s in those 5 races.
Yeah, he's a guy that I would play a little bit or feel a little bit more comfortable playing than Matty D. He offers a little bit more place differential than the guy below him. He's not the model of consistency so far this year that the guy below him, Christopher Bell, has been. But this is a track that I really think could be beneficial to the way that Eric Almirola races. It really fits him, I feel.
You mentioned this track is similar to Texas, and he usually runs good at Texas.
Exactly, and he does have a top 10 here. The last time they actually qualified here, he was on the pole, finished 8th and led some laps. So he knows how to get around here. He has the equipment to get around here if it's tuned right, like we saw last week. He's somebody that I don't want to sleep on.
Yeah, he doesn't have to do a whole lot. If he can move up, if he gets a top 10, he's gonna be in that 5x range
Easily.
He's like, I don't know if I'd really want to play him in cash just because I don't think he has enough. I don't know. I wouldn't really feel comfortable in like a single entry type with him, but in a tournament, if he pops, I don't think you're going to see a lot of people on him because of just so many other good plays around him. Yes, I reluctantly say, Almirola will be in my driver pool this week.
Yeah, he's not your favorite play, I don't think, every week, but he's somebody that whenever the stars align, you have a little bit more confidence in his potential. And this week, I think, lends itself to one of those weeks where you can feel a little bit more confident in playing him.
Christopher Bell comes in at $7,800. We're in the $7,000 tier range now. He starts 8th. Obviously, he's got that win already. He's had some really good runs this year, not just that one off. Obviously performing way better than he did last year. Obviously, Levine is not quite, even though they're aligned with Joe Gibbs, they are not Joe Gibbs equipment. So he's in top tier equipment. He's making the most of it. He's running good. I don't really know what to do with him though this week because we just don't have much data with him here, and he didn't do particularly well last year.
You mentioned he was in Levine equipment last year, and that probably had quite a bit to do with his 18th place finish and not finishing on the lead lap. But you look at what I continue to go back to is his Xfinity stats, because this kid continues to just show talent and continue to perform. He, in his 2 races here, had in the Xfinity Series, started on the pole when in 2018, finished 3rd, and then started 3rd in 2019 and finished 1st. So somebody that can get out and dominate a race because he's in top tier equipment. He's shown consistency throughout the season. He's led 142 laps in this race in 2019 in the Xfinity Cup, so he knows how to get around here. Man, he's starting so high, though.
I know. He doesn't offer that upside that you'd like, and it's hard to see him getting out front and dominating this race which you don't need him to be kind of worth that salary. But you kind of like him to if he's starting that high up, because just running around top 10 all day, it's not that exciting. Your lineups are never going to look that good.
But if he does that, if he runs top 10, finishes, say, ninth, and he gets a handful of fastest laps, that's 5X.
Yeah, it can work. You're probably not taking down any tournaments with him. He's probably not making the optimal at that point. He has that potential to get, I think, with what we've seen, he has potential to get out front and get there.
I disagree. I think you could take down a tournament. If you put him in a GPP tournament and he performs where he gets a third place and he leads 20 laps, that's 7X. And
well, that's what I'm saying. If he does that, yes, you're right. But if he's just riding around top 10 and gets that ninth place finish, he's not. You're not taking down a tournament. You're not getting a top 20 finish with him as far as, in the leaderboard, DraftKings. So I won't fade him because I think he is a little bit sneaky. I don't think a lot of people are going to like playing him because he doesn't offer that PD upside. But I am a little reluctant just because he's starting so high up. But I don't understand how these guys always get paired up salary-wise. Like, they're always right near each other. It seems like Cole Custer starts 27th, comes in at 7,600. He's basically burned anybody who's played DraftKings this year because he's been in your lineups probably every week because he's always in these nice, juicy spots. We've seen them at times run really well. Had some really unfortunate stuff happen as well this year. What do we do with Cole Custer this week?
Well, if he finishes a race where he runs the race towards the end, we would be looking great. But unfortunately, he's just had a couple of issues the last few weeks towards the very end of the race that just impacts the way that he finishes, and it continues to put him in the back of the field whenever they release the starting grid. And here we are again this week where he's sitting there at 7,600, 27th place. It's basically a copy and paste job of last week. His numbers here aren't the greatest, but again, he offers so much upside in top tier equipment. He's somebody I know that folks are going to continue to go back to because of that potential.
Yeah, I unfortunately, like I said, will be in some lineups again because he will fit nicely with that PD upside and that equipment upside. But I think I might tame the ownership down just a little bit because I want to feel confident in most of the lineups that I build. I mean, some of my build, it's like I don't expect this to do good, but hey, if I'm off on, if the race just doesn't go how I'm anticipating, it kind of covers myself a little bit. But I just, at this point, I need to see a little bit more consistency out of that team as a whole, and maybe a little bit better luck too, before I really feel comfortable. The next guy, you want to take this one away?
Well, Bubba Wallace, he had a great finish last week. It puts him in a spot where he's starting 15th at $7,400. It's just a tough spot starting so high up with really unproven equipment. Finishing in the top 15, it's not something we're not expecting. Top 20 is more of a really consistent type where we're really anticipating him being week to week. So to me, there's not a lot of upside starting 15th, unfortunately. He had a great race last week, and it just puts him in a tough spot this week without having a lot of good history here.
And I think if the team can finish around that 15th, 16th place mark, I think they'll actually be pretty happy. That'd be a good finish for them. So, and that's the thing you kind of have to realize with what some of these teams may be going for. Obviously, everyone's going for a win and whatnot, but teams also who aren't in that top tier equipment or who are still trying to get their setups right and whatnot, they're not expecting to win. They may try some crazy pit strategy at the end of the race if the race lends itself, but they're going to go for it. They're going to go for what they think their car can do and try to get that. And I would bet that most of the guys on this team feel like this is around a 15th place car, maybe up a few spots or down a few spots, but around that 15th. So if they can hold this track position, maybe get out front, run some top 10 laps, that would be a great day for them. That won't be the best day for you as a DraftKings lineup builder. It won't, the math just won't work out if that plays out that way.
You knocked it out of the park with that. You summed it up perfectly because he's in this situation he's in this week. It's a great draft or great NASCAR spot, and it's a horrible DraftKings position. And so you look at it from both those angles, and we basically have to roll it up and throw it in the trash from a DraftKings perspective. There's just no upside. But from a NASCAR angle, we're looking at it and we're like, these guys are where they want to be. And if they continue to perform here, it's great for them. It's a great booster going into next year. It helps bring them together as a team.
Well, not even next year. I think if they get a couple good finishes like they got last week,
absolutely,
that could really propel them to where maybe we can consider them as more of like a top 12 car on occasion on a track that he's shown good history and lesser equipment. So I think that they can make some nice improvements throughout the year, but I think like you said, they're right around where I would expect them to want to finish or be happy with finishing.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes up because the guy right below him's in a very similar spot. Austin Dillon starting 7,300. He's in 13th. He's been fairly consistent throughout the year. This is a track like we talked about, similar to Texas where he won. So we kind of want to take that into consideration, but you look at the track history here, he has no top 10s. He's actually kind of struggled here. And it's one of those things where you look at it and you see where he's got to win at Texas. Does he get a little bit risky here? Do they take some gambles? I don't think so because where they're at this year in the playoffs scenario, how consistent they've been, it's a very similar spot to where Bubba Wallace is and what we just got done talking about, I think.
Well, I think if you look at how Austin Dillon has run the last few years, they have improved that team. That organization has, and that organization, obviously, Rich Childress, they have great history in NASCAR, but they've struggled lately. So Austin Dillon, in my opinion, in that team, that 3 team, the last couple of years, they've gone from about on a good day, a 16th to 18th, 19th place car, to a legit top 12 contending car. Not quite top 10. They've been flirting with it. Depends on the track. If it's a track that lends itself to Austin Dillon being, I guess, a little more comfortable there or whatever, they can get those top 10s. They've had that win at Texas. But they have made that improvement from going from, like I say, a 16th to about a 12th place finish, and that's a huge improvement in this sport, consistently going to that.
But if he gets the top 10, we're looking at 5x value, and that's not even really getting any fastest laps or anything because of that price tag. He's in a similar spot, like we just got done talking about, where him and Bubba Wallace, if they get top 10s, they don't have to do anything else except for get those top 10s to reach 5x. They're not going to take down any tournaments, but they're going to be reaching value.
Yeah, and if it's coming down between those two guys in your lineup and you're not playing Cole Custer or anybody else and you've already got every position, if it's just Bubba Wallace, Dillon, I'm going Dillon. I think he offers a little bit more upside. That team's shown a little bit better consistency and strength, and I think like I said, he's just got a little bit more upside.
Moving on down the list, $7,100, we got Ryan Newman starting 28th. Was a little bit of a disappointment last week because he had such a great history or track history, and it just underperformed, unfortunately. This track, he doesn't have as great of history. He's got solid finishes, don't get me wrong, especially the last couple of years, especially starting further back. He offers that place differential that we all look for whenever we're building lineups. I just don't know. It's just not been a Ryan Newman consistent season like we're accustomed to.
I really do not know what to do with Ryan Newman this week because I'm conflicted on his stats. When you look at driver rating, he's, in the last 5 races here at Atlanta, he's the 12th best driver. That's pretty good. There's some good guys below him that he ranks out better. But here's the thing. Here's what's confusing about it. His average finish is 21.6. His average place differential is -14. So he's been, it seems like, starting up higher, I guess running well, and then fading back. Now he starts back. But like you said, when you factor in what they've done this season, kind of inconsistent, but had that good run. Was it Homestead?
I believe it was Homestead.
Yeah, with him and his teammate Chris Buescher both did really well. So they have had some nice races. He doesn't need to do a whole lot to pay off that price tag, obviously. If he can get top 15, heck yeah. But I don't like this one this week.
He's not in a cash game lineup for me, but he could be somebody I tend to throw a little bit more exposure towards in GPP lineups because he just fits and offers a lot of upside with the way that these lineups are probably going to be structured. So somebody that I'm not going to want a ton of exposure to, but I might be a little bit more high on than some of the guys that we're going to be talking about.
So the last guy in the 7K tier is Eric Jones, 7,000, starts 22nd. Not a bad play. I like him personally a little bit more than Newman. I've seen a little bit more out of him consistently, and I think that he has a higher finishing potential than what Newman does, just kind of what we've seen this year. Doesn't need to do a whole lot to reach that value, but at the same time, 7,000, I don't necessarily love this play either.
Yeah, he's, to me, in a very similar spot as Ryan Newman, except for he has 6 spots different of place differential. But this year's just been a little bit different with Eric Jones because he's on a new team. He seems to be fairly comfortable where he's getting these finishes where he's had a decent couple of finishes a little higher than we anticipated. But I just don't know if it's the consistency that we need, or he hasn't been as consistent as what we need in a cash game scenario. Definitely look at him in GPP tournaments because he has top 10 ability. He has equipment that could be in the right scenario in the top 10 if everything aligns, but
not likely that.
I'm really thinking he's more of along the lines of like a 15th, 17th placed kind of day,
which is not terrible.
And if he does that, it's right around 4.5 times 4.5 x value, and it's nice, but it's not what you're really looking for.
Yeah. So if that would be. Yeah, you need him to do a little bit more than a 17th place finish for him to more than likely make the optimal. But I don't think Eric Jones is in that optimal spot. Obviously, anything can happen. He gets a top 5. Yeah, he's going to be in there. But if you just look at the stats and you factor everything in, I think he's a decent play. He's a nice pivot. If you decide to maybe do some head-to-heads, maybe that's a little different. Maybe you get lucky and have a guy who has a bad lineup or whatever. I think he can be a little safer, but not one of my favorite tournament plays personally. But that's me.
The next guy on the list is, we're getting down under the $7,000 tier into the $6,800 price range with Chase Briscoe starting 24th. Again, he's in the a very similar spot to Eric Jones with the starting position. Price tag's very similar, but he hasn't had the consistency of someone that you want to really have your money relying on, I guess, the way we put it, because he's a rookie and he's still learning, and there's a lot of things that a track like this you have to consider and take into account. I'm going to be very leery in having much exposure to Briscoe this week. I really want to see him perform or do something before I have any real sort of confidence in rostering him.
Yeah, and I think he's going to be making improvements. And one of the things I've heard some guys kind of talk about this year, who's been pretty vocal about it in all the series, is because NASCAR isn't doing practice anymore and they're not doing qualifying, they're really hindering the growth of their young drivers. And that goes in every series. So Briscoe's not getting the time in the car that he needs. I mean, these races are kind of practices for him if you really look at it. They just happen to matter. So I think we're going to need to see him run some more races. I think we will eventually start seeing him be more playable, and we'll have more confidence in playing him. He's not a full fade for me this week because he does have a little upside with that starting position and the equipment. But we've seen that you'll need a couple guys if we have a similar outcome like last race. We'll need some $6,000 guys, but I don't think Briscoe personally is going to be that guy we're really going to want to target.
He does offer that place differential upside, and is a reason why you can feel a little bit okay with putting him in some tournament plays, but he's by no means somebody I have any confidence in a cash game scenario.
So Ross Chastain comes in at 6,600, and he's starting 21st. I personally don't have much to say about him and Atlanta. The thing that I got to say about Ross is it didn't take him long to create a new rivalry in the Cup Series, and he just had to go and do it with Kyle Busch. I mean, what is he thinking here? What is Kyle Busch doing back there dealing with him?
Yeah.
It's just like, it's not as bad as like a Garrett Smithley, because Ross Chastain is in much better equipment than Garrett Smithley is. So it's not quite the same, but it's like, dude, Kyle Busch, what are you doing messing with these guys way back here? And Ross, what are you doing picking a fight with the guy like Kyle Busch? I mean, this could get ugly a few times this year.
Well, I think you summed it up really well. Is what is Kyle Busch racing Ross Chastain back in the 20th position for? Because that's really what Ross Chastain is this year. He's a 20th or 18th through 23rd place car. He's in that type of equipment. He as a driver has a lot of talent and he can perform. I just don't know if he has the equipment to really get up there and lead.
Well,
because
it is the 42, and Larson got a lot of it. Now, Ross Chastain is not Kyle Larson, but I think that car has top 15 potential, but Ross needs more time in that equipment to get comfortable with it, because he's got a lot of races in Cup, but most of them are in crap equipment.
Exactly. And putting it that it is Kyle Larson's former car and all that, yes, but we haven't seen that this year. So I really think giving him a 19th or 20th place position finish is what might be reality, and it's not going to be enough to really pay off that price tag. It's more along 4x value, and it's just going to be a little bit more tough to ultimately see him pan out.
Yeah, I think he can be valuable in your lineups, but I don't like it, or I don't love the play, but I will have some Ross Chastain because I recognize the talent. And if a couple of these higher guys take each other out, he can be playable and be real valuable. But again, I don't love it. What do we do with this next guy on the list? Daniel Suarez.
Daniel Suarez, 6,500, starting 25th. He's
another new team, just like Bubba Wallace is.
Yeah, and we aren't 100% sure how that car is going to perform week to week. And last week he was in the optimal because he was able to get some place differential. He had, I think, a few fastest laps, but not something you should expect every week from Daniel Suarez because it is a new team and everything like that. But if he gets a 21st place finish, that's a great day for them. Like we talked about a little bit earlier, where these guys like Bubba Wallace and Daniel Suarez, these guys are really coming together as a team at this point. So we start to get a little bit of an idea potentially later on in the year how they could perform, but we are still analyzing some of this to really, I guess, hone in on what ultimately it's going to look like long term. Right now, I feel a little bit more confident in playing him than Ross Chastain because of the place differential, but
I think that Chastain's equipment is a little bit better than Suarez at this point.
But that place differential with the price tag of being a little bit less, it offers a route to value a little easier. But still somebody I don't want a ton of exposure to by any stretch of the imagination.
And here we are again with another guy that I'm never comfortable playing, but it appears he's gonna need to be in your driver pool and in some of your lineups because he's actually got good track history here. I'm talking about Ricky Stenhouse, 6,300. He's starting 12th. Made the optimal last year, but he was starting 22nd last year, so does not offer that same PD upside, but he's also only 6,300. I mentioned earlier, he is right below Denny Hamlin in driver rating. He's got the 10th best driver rating out of the last 5 races.
Here at this track, right?
At this track.
Yeah, he has quite a decent resume here. He's
only one top 10, but with the equipment that he's had, I mean, an average 14.
That's what I'm getting at, is if he is able to have a day like he has had recently here, even getting a top 13, 14th place finish, if he's able to get a few fastest laps just being in that front of the pack, you could really find a route to 5x value fairly easily because of that low price tag at 6,300. He was in the optimal last week because he was priced so low. He started in, I think, 10th place, and it really helped in a GPP tournament take down the big tournament win. So somebody that you don't want to overlook whenever you're building lineups, in my opinion.
So there's only a few guys really left on this list that I think are worth mentioning. Michael McDowell, 6,100, starts 18th. I think he's not a bad play, but he's run really well this year. I think you got to consider him. But I do think he's kind of in that spot where he needs to at least finish a spot or two above where he starts to be worth it. And he's in that range where it's a little questionable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I am in the same boat with you. I think he's performed so well early that he's almost overachieved. But because we were so high on Michael McDowell last year, because he, if you look at it, was one of the top guys in value throughout the entire season. So we were very accustomed to wanting to roster him throughout the season last year. This year has been a different story because he's been starting way higher than we're accustomed to him starting. And now that we've got a couple of races throughout the season so far, we've seen him kind of progress back to the norm. He's still having great finishes. He's still leading or up in the points, but I think we're trending back towards the norm, and that's where I think this week I don't want to really target him too much.
And he's averaging a 29.4 finish in the last 5 races at Atlanta. It's not a track that, I mean, if you saw like an average of 23rd, 24th or something, you're like, okay, he's had some upsides here. He has no upsides. He had 0 top 20s in these last 5 races. So, like I said, he's run really well. You got to respect that this year. You know, they've got, I'm sure, extra money to play with from that Daytona 500 win. So probably don't completely fade him, but it is a tough spot for me. I'd much rather play the guy right below him, Chris Buescher, 6,000, starting 17th.
Yeah, he has a little bit better performance here. That's one of the reasons that I feel more confident in playing him. He has a top 10 here in the last 2 races, so he can get there because he's shown that he has the ability to do so. And this year he just seems to be at another level compared to where he's been. You hear Chris Buescher's name talked about more through the broadcast than you typically have in recent years. So this year they've got it dialed in a little bit more. And in that price tag, he only has to finish 15th, and he's got 5x. That's not doing anything.
That's no fastest laps, no laps led.
No performance points. That's just straight place differential.
And finishing position.
So that's something that you have to consider whenever you're looking at the building your lineups and filling out that bottom set of drivers. He's somebody that you want to potentially look at. I wouldn't be overexposed to him by any stretch of the imagination, but he's somebody I am more confident and comfortable in putting in my lineups.
Guy who is so that was the end of the $6,000 guys. Now we hit the 5,000. So now we're entering that range where anybody who was below this in the last race, they did not make the optimal. 6,000 or up. that might be different this week. In this race, there's really not a lot that I have to say though about Ryan Preece starting 23rd, 5,800. There's not a lot of upside in my opinion. I don't think he's a terrible play because of how cheap he is. I think he can get a decent finish, but it's not a great track for him. He's only got 2 races here, but he's struggled. Been better this year, been surprising, but there's really not a lot there that I personally like.
Yeah, it's a tough play, but like you said, he's been a little bit more consistent through the first few races this year than obviously last year. Last year they had a lot of stuff go wrong, but this year they seem to be dialed in a little bit more. Again, I'm not expecting a top 15 or whatnot, but if we can find him in the top 20 where we potentially expect him to be, he might be able to get to 5x value. He might be able to contribute, but he's not somebody I really am excited about.
Justin Haley starts 26th, 5,600. Again, not a guy that I'm going to be going to. I think he's an okay pivot. All these guys that we're essentially talking about now, they don't offer hardly any massive upside other than the fact that they're cheap. If they can get a round where they start, finish, it's not going to kill your lineups, and it might allow you to get, if 3 guys dominate and you have them, then it might help. But really, Justin Haley, there's really nothing there for me to say.
Yeah, he's not somebody I'm super excited about. The guy below him, I actually think I would feel a little bit more comfortable rostering. Believe it or not, he's a rookie. Anthony Alfredo at 5,500. He starts 32nd, which is 6 places back from Haley, and it's basically a PD play. This track can somewhat be a wild card race towards the end. So if he can find himself hanging out on the lead lap or being able to be in a position for a lucky dog late in the race, then it could be something where he really is the difference maker in a GPP tournament. I don't want to roster him in a cash game scenario, but he's somebody, even with the lack of experience, that this track could potentially lend to the style of racing that could ultimately make him achieve value fairly easily. Because starting 32nd, if he gets a 22nd place finish, he's at 5x. That's not doing a whole lot, but that's asking a good bit from an unproven rookie.
Yeah, he just had some unfortunate luck this year, it seems like.
We saw John Hunter Nemechek really do some stuff in this car last year.
But I think John Hunter Nemechek came in with a lot more higher-end racing experience.
He absolutely did.
Than Anthony Alfredo. I really feel, honestly, kind of bad for Alfredo. He's another guy, it's like, he could do okay. I think he could maintain Cup status. But these no practice and qualifying, it's really hurting him because he needs extra time in that car. Like some of the other guys that we had mentioned earlier, like Briscoe, they need some time in this car to get comfortable, to learn how they work. Because obviously I've never driven one of these, but I hear from guys who have that they are way different than the Xfinity cars. Even though they look very similar, they're both stock cars, they run very different. He needs experience, and he's getting it. It's just not beneficial the way he's getting it to your lineups. Corey LaJoy, though, comes in at 5,300, starts 2 spots above him, 30th. I know he's going to start running better than where he's been finishing, but he's another guy who's just kind of been having some bad luck this year with this new team. He's got the experience. I like him because he opens the door for a lot of higher end guys. But I certainly don't love what I've seen from him this year.
Yeah, I think he's about as low as I am comfortable going this week. Again, we seem to talk about him every week where we're expecting a little bit of a progress to be made, and they continue to have poor finishes. But I think one of these weeks he's going to get a 22nd, a 23rd place finish.
Top 20 even.
Potentially even that, and really pay off that price tag and open some eyes because he's a talented driver. The equipment isn't top tier, but I don't think it's where he's been finishing. It's better than that. Mm-hmm. So it's been a little bit of a disappointment, if you can say that, for somebody priced in the mid 5,000s every week. But somebody I think could be the key in a tournament scenario to really allow you to really structure your lineup a little bit differently without Austin Cindric, and maybe stack some of those top tier drivers and just be different to take down that tournament.
Yeah, he's the lowest that I'm probably going to go. There's really no one else that I want to talk about. The only one I personally will shout out would be BJ McLeod. Starts 31st, 4,600. He's way down there. He doesn't have to do hardly anything. If he gets a couple spots higher, you're looking at, near 3.5x. Again, that's nothing to be excited about, but because he's 4,600, if you feel more comfortable playing these higher priced guys, that's where you go. But I'm not comfortable really playing anybody below Corey LaJoie. Do you have anybody that you're targeting?
No, I think Corey LaJoie is the bottom of the barrel for me at 5,300, starting 30th. I don't really see too much upside in those other guys at all. They're in lawnmowers, basically, in my opinion. So it's going to be tough to play them. I really think this week we did a lot of good stuff with preparing for the race. Again, we went in and put a lot of work into the race guide, which you can download from our Patreon. The link's below. Each week we spend hours filling that thing full of data to pair it and stack it with this podcast. We've added and continue to add pages to it to bring you more relevant information each and every week. It's just something that we want.
And it's something it's beyond just a spreadsheet full of data. It helps the person who's maybe not into NASCAR as much, or maybe not, who gets overwhelmed by numbers and who just needs to see what we see in a little easier way. So we really kind of try to break it down. Now, we also post in our Patreon, we do post a lot more like just spreadsheet data. So if you want to see a little bit more, we do provide that as well. But I love what we're doing with the race guide and some of the new additions, because like I said, I think it's going to be really nice for these beginner to sort of intermediate players. Maybe you're familiar with DraftKings and playing other sports, but maybe NASCAR is new to you. These numbers can get overwhelming, and it's nice to be able to kind of see it in a clearer picture.
And again, I think it stacks really well with our podcast because we go into so much detail here that you can take a look at the digital magazine, which is our race guide, and really just highlight it really highlights what we talked about, and takes that form factor of what a lot of people are used to in spreadsheets and condenses it and puts it in a nice, pretty picture for people to really, I think, focus on a little bit easier.
Yeah, I agree. So any last little thoughts about Atlanta before we put a bow tie on this episode?
I'm excited to see if Harvick runs his typical line, see if Hotlanta lives up to its capability or its name, and it's going to be a longer race where fatigue could be an issue. Conditioning. So those younger guys might have a little bit of advantage. We don't know. These guys with experience have what it takes to get the job done too. So I'm just excited to see ultimately how it shakes up, and hopefully we can come out on top with some DK winnings.
Yeah, some of those guys, after they get out of their car, they may need some pickle juice to help rehydrate themselves a little bit, because it's going to be hot down there. It's going to be humid, and they're going to be pushed to their limits for sure in this 500-mile race.
I'm going to take a swig of my good pickle juice right now and get ready, because I think it's going to be a hot Atlanta race, and I'm excited for it.
Yeah, so with all that being said, please check out the description below. We got links to our Twitter. We put out our dark horse pick. We had some success so far this year. We take chances with it, so it's not going to hit a home run. It's not it's just some of the information that we're seeing behind the data that we think could really pop and really give you a nice little edge. We put that out on usually Sunday mornings, so give us a follow on Twitter. And if you found this video helpful at all, give us a like, consider subscribing, and drop a comment below. Let us know what you think. If you won some money or win some money, let us know. Yeah, anything else?
Man, we'd love to interact with everybody, so do, like he said, make sure you follow us on Twitter. That's where we're most active.
All right. Well, good luck to your lineups, sir, and good luck to your lineups out there. we will see you guys next week.